glad that you're here. The sermon title for today is Where Two or Three Are Gathered. Some of you may know that this is a direct quote from a verse in the Bible. And I just want to also just say a big welcome to all those of you who are watching online. I know that we have many fans, not fans, but people who are watching online, not fans, people watching online, and some from all over the world. And we're glad that you're here with us this morning. We just finished a huge series of presentations that, to be quite honest, just took my breath away. And now I'm trying to recover from that. And so Benton was able to preach last week to give me a little break. And but I'm back on the saddle because I just love to share the Word of God. And so we're taking a little bit of a turn here at Really Living for the next couple of months, where we spent the whole summer kind of just giving you some hardcore truth, to say the least. And now I want us to get into the practical component of our faith and of religion. And so what I'm about to share with you today is going to challenge all of us in ways that perhaps you've never been challenged before. And we were most definitely challenged last week by Benton as well, to start realizing that we don't have to depend on the church to do acts of kindness. We just have to depend on the calling of God on our hearts. And when you see a need, you just meet it with your resources and your time to the best of your ability. And I'm excited for tomorrow as we will be doing a free oil change for single parents. We've got 16 people who are going to come to get a free oil change, and 30 of you will be volunteering for that. And you should read some of the things that have been written about this ministry in the newspaper this week. Such a blessing. And so we want to continue to be loving other people with the gifts that He has given us. I want to start with this verse, but before we do that, I want to pray. Heavenly Father, you are welcomed here. We have, for lack of a better word, we've sung you into this place. As we have reflected on your love, on your grace, on your resurrection, through these songs, on your power and on your glory, you have been sung into this place. Our hearts are just rejoicing that we can be with one another, even though we have to distance and sit far apart from each other. But we are glad to be here on this day, the day that we chose to rest and just give you glory. May it be a day of rest for all of us. And I pray, Father, that the words that I'm about to share with the people that I love so dearly, Father, will be words of encouragement and words of direction for all of us in our lives. Amen. So yes, a verse in the Bible, Matthew 18, verses 19 to 20. And if you like to read your own Bible, you can follow along because I'm using the New King James Version, but perhaps you like your version better. And so that's what I use. It says, again, I tell you that if two of you on earth agree about anything you ask for, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. It seems to me that in order for God to do something, people here have to agree. Isn't that interesting? And then it says, the famous verse that some of you know by heart, for where two or three come together in my name, I'm going to be with them. I remember flipping through one of our denominational magazines some years ago. And I turned to the page in the back, and you know, sometimes the best advertising is the one with the least amount of words. And it was an advertising for one of our educational institutions down south. And they had the logo of the institution. And right in the middle it says, God lives here. And I thought to myself, that's a little presumptuous, isn't it? God lives here? I understand that this was an attempt to show the readership that this college endeavored to create a spiritual environment or atmosphere that will be so good for your children that is good enough for God. But all it takes for God to be present according to the verse, that two people have to agree and they have to come together and He'll be with them. This says a lot about how churches should be and what kind of environment we should create as a church. And this is exactly the reason why I believe there are so many churches today, because we just don't agree. And we don't come together under His name. We come together under other names. Sometimes our own. And this is reflected in the recent statistics about how our society sees churches and religion today. I got this from a website, intrust.org. If you want that website, I'd be happy to give it to you at the end of this session, because I don't think you can, well, you may be able to read that, but these are actually Canadian statistics, which I like, because oftentimes when we get religious statistics, we always get the American ones. And last year's story in the Maclean's magazine examined the changing trends in who's going to church and who is not. And weekly attendance at religious services in Canada is just right here. 2013, 13%. That's all the religions. Not just Christianity. Islam, all of them. 13%. This is according to a December 13 poll by Evangelical Fellowship of Canada and the Angus Reid Forum, which is a national polling firm. So what does this number mean? Well, just after World War II, right here, it was 67%, 1946. From 67% to 13%. Even in the mid-1980s, it was about 1/3 of Canadians could still be found in a worship service at some point in any given week. 2.5 million fewer Canadians were at public worship in any given week by 2013. Now, the decline has not been shared equally across all the religious traditions. As Figure 2 shows, a number of French Catholics who say that they've attended the service in the past 12 months went down from 1996 from 16% to 5%. English Catholics from 33 to 19%. Mainline Christianity dropped by half. And in evangelicals from 49 to 40%. The number has fallen and continues to fall. This is 2013. That's 7 years ago. Attendance hasn't been the only decline, but also affiliation has also seen sharp drops among some groups, especially mainline Protestants. For example, in 1981, 32% were in the mainline, were attending church, said that they had a religious affiliation, and look at 2011, 14%. It's dropping almost at everyone, except for the evangelicals, went from 8, 8, 9, and 10, which is not a huge increase. 30 years later, it says that only 14% of Canadians identified with one of those historic Protestant denominations like United Church, and Presbyterians, and Anglicans, a drop of more than 50%. And you know what's interesting is look at this. The increase in no affiliation, no religion. From 8 to 24. For all my friends from the States who are watching right now, your statistics are no better. It's just that you start at a higher number, but you drop just as much as we did. Here's an interesting statistic that I found. According to a 2015 large church Canadian survey, 300,000 Canadians, or 1 in 8 of all church-going Protestants, attend a large congregation. one with at least 1,000 in attendance each week. The news report says that about 150 Canadian churches have more than 1,000 in attendance. Only 150 in the whole country. Nearly 80% of them reported an increase in attendance over the last 5 years. Here's a quote that I found really troubling in the McLean magazine. It says, "As some churches dwindle, others grow. And as some age, others are revitalized by immigration and by young families who seem to be searching for big and better." Isn't that what you're looking for? Isn't that what we're conditioned to look for? You got to go to this place. It's happening. They have 800 people. We have big box stores, bigger, better prices, more variety. And the little mom and pop shops are dying all around us, where you get better service and more attention. We built a big church here, and more people are coming. I don't know if it's better. It's definitely bigger than it was. And we had nothing. We were renting. But we are definitely intentional about being a center of influence that will bring hope and wholeness to people. Much like the sermon that Pastor Benton preached last week. And we're going to put into action tomorrow. Our measure of success is not, and I say this for me, and maybe for you too. Our measure of success is not so much how many people come here, but rather how many people want to be here. There's a huge difference. Why do you go to church? Because you have to? Because you feel that if you don't go, you're not going to be saved? Perhaps because your mom and dad have done it, so you do it too? If people go to church because they want to, they will support the direction of that church. But if people are just here because it's the right thing to do, then many of them will end up being part of those statistics. Ask not what the church can do for you, but what you can do for God. The reason why churches are in decline is because many people were in the church for the wrong reason. And as the world continues to turn, and as we talked about over the last 4 months, as the devil continues to deceive and work incredibly hard, churches are becoming less and less and less influential. But in this world, we've been influenced by the fact that we don't associate success with small, quiet, holy, and truth. We associate success with noise, crowds, colors, and excitement. The fact is that religion is in decline and atheism is on the rise. Maybe we're doing something wrong. And what's the most scary is the last statistics have shown that people are flocking to larger churches. The reasons can vary, but I think one of the big ones is this: incognito. Let me come, let me consume, and let me go home. Don't mingle in my life, don't tell me what to do, and don't challenge what I believe. Just let me be. And so churches have catered their messages to that desire. And what we have now is weak Christians. But as churches, what is our main goal? What is our main goal? Well, like Benton shared with us last week, one component is to make an impact on other people's lives. And I believe that the second component that I would like to talk to you about today is that God has to have an impact on you. Churches have to create an environment where God can speak to you. For those of you who have known me, this has always been my passion. I don't want to do things because that's the way we've always done it. I want to do things because it's going to help you and me grow spiritually. To face the battles of every day, to face the temptations that we go through, and to face the challenges that we create for ourselves sometimes. For God to have an impact on you. If I was to pass out a survey right here today and to all the people who are listening online, and you would give me one way you think that this church can accomplish that in your life, I get 100 different answers. Maybe a few may overlap. I get 100 different ways on how you think that God can impact your life. And partly because we're all made different, right? We have different personalities. There's different things that get us going. We have different upbringings. Some of us have just walked through life fairly easy, and some of us have been battered and bruised along the way. But also because I think that most of us don't really know what's good for us. We think we do. But I don't know about you, but every time I read the Bible, I kind of get a little bit of a slap in the face. Francis, wake up. The way you're thinking is not right. Because if we understood how God is to impact our lives, I think there'd be a lot more order in the world today. And there wouldn't be so many religions and so many denominations. The Bible is loaded with examples of religious people who did not know how to allow God to impact their lives. That's why we have the Bible, so we can learn from their mistakes. You see, God didn't write a Bible, a perfect book. You do this and you're... No, he wrote a book about a whole bunch of people who made mistakes so that we won't make the same ones. But isn't it funny how history repeats itself, doesn't it? But there does seem to be a way, repeated over and over and over again in the Bible, that seems to have been the most successful in allowing God to have an impact on you. What does a church need in order for you to grow spiritually? It needs to become smaller. And this is exactly what people are running away from, including Christians. Again, I tell you that if two of you on earth agree about anything you ask for, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. For where two or three come together in my name, there I am with them. And don't get me wrong, I believe that an inspiring, heartfelt praise time is instrumental for you and me to grow spiritually. No amens on that. Oh, okay, so I'm the only one that believes in this. What about the praise team? Do you agree? I also believe that a relatable, biblical, and charismatic sermons should be preached from this pulpit. And I know that weekly fellowship such as this one is vital to our social needs, and that nothing beats the kind of energy that this creates. I mean, before COVID hit, we had 50 to 60 people that would come here on Saturday nights just to fellowship. But the earlier statistic talks about all those churches who are doing all those things, and yet they're all in decline. But where there is two or three, there is accountability. But where there's two or three, there's intimacy. Where there's two or three, there's vulnerability. I don't get much more vulnerable than my brother Guy over here. As we've gotten to know each other, as we've been in small groups together, as we spend time together, I know a lot about his life. And I haven't told anybody else in this church, because that's not my right. He may have told other people, I don't know. But because I know him, he's allowed me to get to know him. I respect him more. I respect his walk with God. Where two or three, there is honesty. There's reality. We all come here on Sabbath mornings, Saturday mornings, maybe Sunday mornings, if some of you go to church on Sunday, and we always show people that we've got it all together, yet our lives are falling apart. Where there's two or three, we truly come together in the name of the Lord. It's interesting that not once in the New Testament, Jesus ever promoted large gatherings. Now, he definitely created them. Just by showing up, there's 100 people who would show up. People were hungry and thirsty for what he had to offer. But he never tried to settle. He never tried to start a church, or he never tried to establish a religion. As a matter of fact, he worked with small groups. 12 men and several women, we don't know how many, who he shaped and molded with moderate success, dare I say, at least according to world standards. One of them became a preacher. That was Peter. Another one became an apologetic professor. That was Matthew. And another one became a theologian. That was John. But that's just 25%. One of the women became a legend of forgiveness, Mary the prostitute. And another one became an activist for the poor, Dorcas. We would probably not consider that to be very successful, considering how many people were around him. But you know what? Jesus wasn't into numbers. Jesus is into hearts. And he understood that change happens when someone is willing to listen, to care, and to be empathetic towards someone else. That's the type of Jesus we serve. Had Jesus wanted to, he could have raised a church in no time. He could have made thousands and thousands of shekels. He could have become the most popular man on earth. Think about it. He can heal people. By his breath, Roman soldiers would fall. He can also fix you. If your ear gets cut off, he can just put it right back. That's a pretty convincing argument for this guy being divinely empowered and should be followed, don't you think? Yet he was riding on the donkey, coming into Jerusalem. Everybody wanted to hail him king, and he started to cry. Because he knows that when we become large, we have a more temptation to become prideful. So he worked on individual hearts one at a time. And this is what he's calling us to do as well. And that can only happen in small groups, not in a room with 200 people. Especially during COVID. He engaged a woman at the well. He even sent his disciples off because he knew they would get in the way. Too many people. she would be intimidated, right? And he engaged a Pharisee in the middle of the night because he was too afraid that people would see him with Jesus. Just two of them. Jesus, no problem. He spent more time with the 3 than he did with the 12. He took the 3 up on a mountain once. He took the 3 up into the garden too when he prayed just the day before he was going to die. He always worked in small towns, didn't work a lot in Jerusalem. And he also had his 3 friends, Lazarus, Martha, and Mary, that he spent some time with. And that was more to let his hair down and watch a soccer game or just to chillax a little bit. In a nutshell, a church is not successful if it increases in numbers, but if the people who are in it increase in humility and grace. And it's harder to be humble when you're big. And I believe that for that to happen, you and I have to get to know each other at a deeper level. A church should be a place where you're fully known and fully loved. The work of a church boils down to how the people who are in it know each other, and that just doesn't happen on Saturday mornings. And believe it or not, how well we know each other is a reflection of how well we know God. Look at this verse. It's in 1 John 4, verse 7. It says, "Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God, and everyone who loves is born of God and knows God." Do you realize that relationships actually allow you to get to know God? Because you get to practice love. Because I can tell you, and you know this more than I do, you have certain bonds with people in this church. And some of those bonds are just like automatic. Oh, these people are just like us. And we just relate to them so well. And then there's other people that you avoid. I'm here to challenge you today that go to those people you avoid. Because maybe in that relationship, not maybe, in that relationship, you will actually grow with God. And that's why in a big church it's easy to be incognito. But when you join a small group of 8 people, all of a sudden you shine just like the rest of them. I know that for some of us it's a little scary, but once you realize that to be known is to be loved, you get used to it. And most of us are really awkward at loving one another. We all have our own struggles with our relationships, and whether it's with a spouse or with children or co-workers. And there's always some people who are just harder to love, and maybe we've never noticed, but maybe we're hard to love too sometimes. If it wasn't the case, we'd all just be willing to be open with one another. But yet it seems clear that knowing one another is knowing God. This is why starting in October the 12th to the 16th, or October 3rd, next week, we're going to start a sermon series entitled Living Love. 7 habits for an authentic life. And these 7 traits are not vague feelings or good intentions. They are habits we learn to practice when we decide to become authentically loving people. They are basic, practical traits that are doable in everyday life. Yet, the result of making these traits a habit is remarkable. I'll give you a clue. The first one is kindness. I came to this church 11 years ago because I believed in a model that was practiced here, which was small groups. And over those 7 weeks that we're going to spend together, it'll start on the week of the 12th to the 16th. You'll be given a chance to go deeper with 8 to 10 people who will hold you accountable to develop the love of God in your life. I think that you need to take a close look at the Thursday email this week, which will give you an option as to the different groups that you can join. Starting on the 12th, that you'll make that commitment to get to know someone you don't know. I know it's going to be on Zoom. I know we're not going to get to meet physically. But come on, folks, this is COVID. Look, we have 200 members in this church. We have 50 of you here today. We only have 25% of our church here today. Don't you miss your brothers and sisters? I miss them terribly. This is the highlight of my week. And now you get to spend time with 8 to 10 and get to know them more intimately for 7 weeks. Can you make that commitment for 7 weeks? We have some people who rose up to the occasion and have decided to be leaders for the first time because they felt God has asked them to do that. I've even asked for some of the leaders in our church to be the spiritual leaders with the volunteers that they work with in the church. Because if you and your volunteers can develop these 7 habits of love, can you imagine how better your ministry will be? And if you're not a volunteer in the church, then you can just go on the Thursday email and check out what's available and join one. Spend the time with one another. Because to know one another is to know God. I really believe that meaningful, loving relationships are the basic fundamental structure of a church. And if we recall the earlier statistics that I present to you in regards to the church attendance and affiliation, it seems that we have a problem. I was talking to a friend of mine from the Baptist church. He came and brought me lunch on Tuesday. A nice guy. A salmon sandwich and a cheesecake. I had a stomachache for 2 days because I don't eat that stuff usually. But he was so nice to bring it to me. And he told me, he says, Francis, there's a problem with the church today. I said, oh, what's that? He goes, man, in our denomination, we have Episcopalians that come, Methodists, and then they leave, they go to that church. They just choose a church that they like the best. He says, what's the problem? I said, because we don't believe in truth. We just choose what we want. And he knows because him and I have been going back and forth with this for a while now. Talking about the Sabbath and some of those things. I sent him that article this morning that I sent to you. I believe that if we go bigger here at Really Living, which we are, because once Lauren and Kristen are actually transferred to this church, we will pass the 200 number. But I believe that we also need to become smaller. We need to be intentional that you connect with one another so that you can connect with God. We are not immune to the superficiality of most churches. And I believe that many of you could be happy to leave if things don't go your way here. You could leave if somebody tells you something that you don't like. But you may not leave if you're held accountable by a God-loving brother and sister in the church who's going to encourage you along the way when you get hurt, when you stumble, or when you're just far from God. Because that happens to all of us, whether you want to admit it or not. I believe that genuine and real relationships is the only way to deepen our walk with God. Meaningful relationships is where Matthew 18 can happen. Where people come together in agreement, where God can be with them. If we read up a little earlier in that chapter, there's something very interesting. It says, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. How many of you do that? What? Oh, 1, 2. You know what we do? Here's what we do. Okay, when somebody sins against us, we go and tell other people. Did you know what she did to me? Or do you know what he said? Did you know what she was wearing in church? That's what we do. And you know what happens when we do that? It divides the church. It divides your relationship with God's. Now, this is true vulnerability. This is true accountability. Now, if you're the type of person that has a bone to pick with somebody every Saturday or every Sunday that you go to church, for those who are watching, and then maybe you should think before you speak. But if somebody has truly done something to you that you feel has been offensive, or perhaps that they're doing something in their life that they shouldn't do. I met with 2 people this week, and we talked, and they want to become members of this church, and I had to point out a few things. And they're like, you know what? You're right. Because it says, go and tell his fault between you and him alone. And if he hears you, you have gained your brother. And then it says, if that doesn't work, go bring 2 or 3 other with you. And if that doesn't work, bring the whole church. And if that doesn't work, let them be Pharisees. But we should always start by just, hey, you know what you said to me yesterday? Maybe I misunderstood it, but it really hurt. Can we talk about it? Man, the kind of relationships that would create in this church. And it can only happen between 2 or 3 people, or 2 or 3 if you need help. This is true vulnerability. The reality is that when we have something with someone, we don't speak to them. The Bible calls this gossip. We need to speak with one another in love, to help one another in changing our behaviors. I have been helped so much in this church by people who weren't afraid to come up to me and say, Francis, are you sure this is the right thing? Or when you said that, what did you mean? And sometimes people have said things about me, not to me, but to other people. But I hear it to other people, so now I go straight to them and say, did you say that about me? Can we talk about it? And then we talk about it because they don't have a choice. And then they realize that it's safe to do that. Now, I know some of us don't like to be told what to do, and we get all angry, and we get upset, we get emotional. But we need to grow. As individuals, we need to grow. There's no better way than for your true self to come out than when you're with people. Avoid people, you avoid change. Avoid change, you avoid God. There are too many people in our churches that are suffering alone. And if this is you, ask yourself this question. Am I doing everything I can to make sure I connect with some people in the church? And if you're not suffering alone in this church, then you need to ask yourself this question. Am I doing everything I can to make sure that no one is disconnected in my church? And if you're a long-time member of this church, ask yourself that question. And I think if you're an experienced member, if you've been in church for a long time, perhaps you should take the challenge to lead a small group so that you can connect with people and help them know the Jesus you know. Ingrid is asking some of you seasoned members to take a leap of faith and to take a few people along with you on that spiritual journey for 7 weeks. I'm glad that there's 3 of our leaders that have accepted to do it for the first time. Praise the Lord. We need more of you to see God use you in that way. And it's not going to happen by coming to church on Saturdays. No meaningful relationship can be established by coming to a church service. All you do is listen to me. All right, that's enough. I've shared enough. There's another verse in Matthew. It says, oh boy, here we go again. All right, Mikey, can you flip, or somebody flip it for me because it's not working again. Oh, here we go. Matthew 18:12-14, it says, what do you think? If a man has 100 sheep and one of them goes astray, he leaves the 99 behind. He goes to the mountain to seek for the one that is straying. And if he should find it, or surely I say to you, he rejoices more over that sheep than over the 99 that did not go astray. Even so, it is not the will of your Father. Even so, it is not the will of your Father who is in heaven that one of these little ones should perish. You see, the whole Matthew 18 is all about understanding the one or two principle. And in this case, it's for us to see the ones who are alone and reach out to them, especially those who were part of the fold and are not anymore. And in the next one, in Matthew 18 again, starting in verse 1 to 4, it says, at that time the disciples came to Jesus saying, who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? They were hoping that he would say them because they've been following him for 3.5 years, or however long it was when they asked that question. And Jesus brings a little child and he puts a child on his lap. And he says, unless you are converted and become as a child, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever humbles himself as this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Is it hard to get a group of 8 kids together to do something together? Doesn't matter what it is. To discuss, to play, to weed a garden. Maybe a little harder to get them to weed a garden, but for 5 minutes we can probably do it. An hour will be a little hard, but it's not. And they don't care about what color your skin is. They don't care how much money your daddy has in the bank. They don't care what kind of car your dad drives. They don't care about your theology. They just, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. And then they don't care if they say the wrong thing. You ask a question. Okay, like you can ask a question like, how difficult was it for Jesus to be in the Garden of Eden, or to be in the Garden of Gethsemane? Jesus! You ask, it may not be the right question, but they're happy to share, they're happy to speak. And we get into small groups, they don't say anything. I don't know the answer to that one. Or I don't want to be part of a small group because I don't know as much as those people. It's not about knowing, it's about being. It's about experiencing what other people are experiencing and then feeling free enough to share. Last night we had a Sabbath school, right, Davison and Tsitsi? You were there, and Lizzie too. And did you notice what I tried to do? I tried to bring in Darlene. Poor Darlene. I'm mentioning her in front of everybody. She's more of a quiet one. But every time she spoke, man, there was wisdom. And there was wisdom in what she said. And I pushed you, Tsitsi, too. And when you shared some things, it was wisdom. I want to hear what you guys have to say. I speak all the time. You speak all the time, Davidson. Colin speaks all the time. Doug's. But there's some who don't. And because we speak all the time, we don't hear the wisdom from other people. For those of us who like to flap our gums, let's be quiet and let's ask what other people think. Because we have much to gain. We have much to gain. And don't be afraid to share what you feel, what you think. Because you have something to give to us, just like these little children. The most popular opposition to small groups that I've heard, and I've been pushing small groups from a long time, is I just don't know enough to be part of it. The only thing that you have to be able to do to be part of a small group is breathe. That's it. It's not hard to get a bunch of children to play, talk, and do God's work. And the Bible says we need to be converted like them. Because if we're not like them, we can't have the kingdom of heaven. Trust me, in this upcoming small group session for 7 weeks, it's not going to matter how much you know. What's going to matter is if you're willing to let people hold you accountable to love principles. This will be a challenge to the talkers. Oh, there's no theology in this. I don't want to be part of that. I'm not learning anything. Well, you can learn about how she feels or how she relates to this or how he's challenged this week and needs prayer. I hope you take this time. 1 hour a week. One small group of your choice. and get to know God by getting to know one another. And it says, where two or three, I'll read it again. Again, I tell you that if two of you on earth agree about anything you ask for, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. For where two or three come together in my name, there I am with them. And the statistics tell us that if we don't do this, you could be one of those who will leave the church. And just to make the 7-week session a little bit more fun, by the time we start 2 weeks from now, I will give each group $100 as seed money and multiply it, and then your group will do an act of kindness over the month of December for someone outside the church. Because it's not just about meeting and getting to know things, but it's about meeting together so that we can meet the needs of others. And if we can put our heads together to pour into someone some goodness and some kindness and some love as a group, not only will it draw us together, but it'll draw our community together here in Hamilton. I encourage you to take the time to read our next Thursday newsletter and register with a small group, because it'll be limited to 10 people. And for those of you who are volunteers in the church, I encourage you to join your leader if your leader is leading a group. And if you're not a volunteer in the church, then just join whichever one you like and learn to be a better lover. For God. You and I don't have to be part of the statistics, but we have to be part of the solution. Here at Really Living Center, we will continue to do our best to create an atmosphere of respect, authenticity, truth, and also to challenge your faith. It'll be up to you to invest in coming together with one another so that where you are, God can also be.